in the chapel of Santa Maria Antigua in the Cathedral of Seville. The Cathedral of Seville is overwhelming, one of the largest Gothic cathedrals in the world, an astounding structure built largely during the 15th century and completed early in the 16th century in construction, and then embellished and enriched throughout the 16th century. The scale, the monumentality of this building tells the story of Seville itself. Seville is an ancient city. It was a Celto-Iberian settlement. It was a Carthaginian settlement. It became a Roman city. It became a Visigothic city. It was conquered by the Arab Umayyad invaders who came to Iberia and established a major center in Seville. In the Middle Ages, after the fall of the Caliphate of Cordoba, Seville was a self-governing taifa, a city-state. Then in 1248, it was incorporated into the expanding Catholic state of Spain. The conqueror Ferdinand III arrived and defeated the Muslim forces and incorporated Seville into Castile in the continuing process of the Reconquest. That was in the 13th century. By the 14th and 15th centuries, even before the completion of the Reconquest, Seville became one of the major trading cities of Europe. And the reason is Seville sits along the Guadalquivir River in a strategic location where it provided a wonderful inland port for Mediterranean trade and for increasingly Atlantic trade. Seville was an active trader with Venice. It was an active trader with Antwerp. It was an active trader with other cities further north along the North Sea. So Seville became a center of trade and a center of commerce in the expanding Europe of the 14th and 15th centuries. Rich enough to build a grand cathedral, rich enough to have the aspiration to declare to the world, we are Seville, one of the grand cities of the Christian world. But Seville became even more central to world history in the years 1492 and after, because it was at the beginning of 1492 when the last Islamic stronghold, Granada, fell to the Reconquista, fell to Isabella and Ferdinand, and now the whole Iberian Peninsula was in Christian hands. And Seville was suddenly thrust into a new role. And that new role took place here at the very beginning, because it's in this chapel that none other than Christopher Columbus came to pray to Mary, to Santa Maria. This is Santa Maria Antigua, meaning that this is Santa Maria, an image that was taken from the old church when the mosque of the Islamic rulers was converted to a church centuries earlier. This beautiful image of Santa Maria was painted in one of the chapels of the old church. And when the new church was built in this grand structure, that beautiful painting was put into the new chapel. But the new chapel was the chapel of Santa Maria Antigua, meaning Santa Maria of the old church. Christopher Columbus came here and knelt before the image of Santa Maria and prayed for the safety of his voyage that would commence from Seville in 1492, and he promised that if he returned alive, he would come to give thanks. And of course, Christopher Columbus arrived in Hispaniola, thinking it was the Indies and thinking that he was in Asia, therefore creating what later became known as the West Indies and calling the local population Indios, thinking that he was in India of Asia. He returned here as he promised and knelt before the image of Saint Mary and gave his gratitude. And by doing so, he also made this chapel an iconic place for all of the future voyagers that would go from Seville to discover the routes around the world and to go to conquer for Spain in both the Americas and Asia. So a second and one of the most important moments of this chapel came when the crew of Ferdinand Magellan arrived here also to pray to Santa Maria Antigua. Ferdinand Magellan was a Portuguese sailor and explorer who had the idea, like Columbus, of finding that route westward which would actually reach Asia. And in 1510s, he appealed to the Portuguese king for the rights and the backing to travel, to try to find a southern route westward that would pass southward of what was now known as the continent with Brazil and pass south of South America on the way to the East Indies. He did not get support from the Portuguese, but he did find interest from the Spanish king Charles I, known to us in history as Charles V of the Holy Roman Empire. Because Charles V had a different interest and a different idea from the Portuguese kings. Remember the Treaty of Tordesillas of 1494, which, in the view of the kingdoms of Spain and Portugal, had divided the world. Part would be under Spanish dominion with the new discoveries, and part would be under Portuguese dominion. And that line, set by the Treaty of Tordesillas, 270 leagues to the west of Cape Verde, held that discoveries to the west of that line would be Spanish, and discoveries to the east would be under the control of Portugal. That left the entire continent, and especially the west coast of Africa, under Portuguese control. So when Magellan appealed to travel west in order to get to Asia, this was not of much interest for the Portuguese, because they already were reaching Asia by traveling around the Cape of Good Hope in the southern tip of Africa to reach Asia. But for the Spanish king, this was still a real need, because the Spanish king could not use the Portuguese routes down the west coast of Africa. He had to find different routes to reach Asia. Otherwise, Spain was blocked by Portugal under the Treaty of Tordesillas. So Carlos I of Spain, or Carlos V of the Holy Roman Empire, as we most commonly know him, backed the expedition of Magellan. And Magellan and his crew of around 270 on 5 ships came to this chapel to pray before Santa Maria Antigua. And they embarked from Seville, the main port of Spain, and went westward and in the southward direction and circled the southern tip of South America, known to us ever after as the Straits of Magellan. It was a daring and extraordinarily dangerous and difficult trip. In fact, Magellan did not survive it. He was killed in a battle with the locals in the Philippines Islands. Much of the rest of the crew also died along the way. Many ships went down. Other sailors were captured or ended up in Portugal. 18 of the original crew members on one ship arrived 3 years after the voyage began in 1522. And bestraggled and in desperate condition, they made their way to this chapel to give thanks for their survival to Santa Maria Antigua. Magellan's voyage did not have commercial significance, but it changed the world in terms of showing that one could circumnavigate the world through ocean travel. And it created truly the full idea of a world that could be held in one's imagination as a unified world. And this place has a significance of both the launch and the conclusion of that voyage.